Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Vietnam served as the chair of ASEAN in 2010 and has since demonstrated little respect for core principles in the ASEAN Charter to strengthen democracy and protect and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms. The economic advances of Asia in the last quarter century have been nothing short of astounding. Since Doi Ma, or economic liberalisation, growth has been miraculous, lifting millions out of poverty. But lifting people out of poverty is not enough. It is important the way in which it's done. The world needs more good growth. This differentiation is widespread in economics, and the united opinion of commentators from Amartya Sen to Greg Mankiw is that the world needs more good growth or conscientious capitalism. To guarantee further good growth and responsible growth, cognizant of human and the benefit thereof, Australia should have a greater say. This motion is all about getting this place to put responsibility before reticence. It's about standing up. We're talking about Asia. This is where we live. The people we're talking about here are our neighbours. To paraphrase former UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan, we must have an interest for selfless and selfish reasons. Our interest in issues in Vietnam goes beyond the altruistic. We have economic and security interests in the region. 1/2 of the world's seaborne trade travels through the region surrounding the Paracel and Spratly Islands. Our Parliament should mirror the concerns held by the Australian regarding China and its intention in the region, remembering that prudence is to look at processes and proceedings, not just pronouncements. This would mean asking more and difficult questions of China and its desire to engage claimants to the disputed territories of the Paracel and Spratly Islands in bilateral dialogues. If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. This speaks to our values. As an Australian and a free person, I am concerned. I cite the case of Nguyen Phuong Nguyen and Dinh Nguyen Ca. Vietnam is signatory to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I call upon Vietnam to step up, honour your words and commitments. The time is now, and the opportunity is the Australia-Vietnam Human Rights Dialogue. Under the current constitution, the Communist Party of Vietnam is the only one allowed to rule, the operation of all other political parties being outlawed. This is the main problem in terms of political freedom. Other human rights issues concern freedom of association, freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And I draw the attention to Freedom House reports that a provincial court in Vietnam committed the 14 activists of subversion of authorities, sentencing 13 of the activists to 3 to 13 years in prison and giving one activist a suspended sentence. The 14 activists, which include students, bloggers and citizen journalists, were accused of having ties to the banned Viet Thanh network and were tried together in a sham trial that lasted only 2 days. Most of the activists are Catholic, a group often persecuted in Vietnam, reflecting the government's poor record on religious freedom. Freedom House is also concerned by reports that several family members and supporters of the activists who peacefully gathered outside the courthouse were harassed, assaulted and detained by police officers. This is the latest escalation in the government's persecution of free speech advocates. Lee Kwok Kwan, a blogger who was arrested on December 27 and subsequently began a hunger strike to protest his detention, has been denied visits from his family and lawyer. Freedom of expression is severely curtailed in Vietnam, and the country is rated not free in Freedom of the World 2012, Freedom of the Press 2012 and Freedom on the Net 2012. Harassment of cyber activists has been on the rise since 2008, and the government engaging in a targeted campaign against critics cracking down on blogs and social media, and harassing and detaining independent bloggers and their families. The government restricts religious practices through legislation, registration requirements, harassment and surveillance. Especially centrally directed police unit A41 monitors groups the authorities consider religious extremists. Religious groups are required to register with the government and operate under government-controlled management boards. The government bans any religious activity deemed to oppose national interests, harm national unity, cause public disorder, or sow divisions. Adherents of the same unregistered religious groups and religious activists campaigning for internationally guaranteed rights are harassed, arrested, imprisoned, or placed under house arrest. Just January of this year, police used tear gas and electric batons to disperse villagers from Dom Chien parish near Hanoi who were trying to stop police from taking down a crucifix. Australia should advocate for a conscientious capitalism. It is not beyond our right and duty to wish to see greater human rights and freedoms in Vietnam, but I urge all in this place to be conscious of the need of economic development. For it is true that if we have nothing, it is easy to share. The pie needs to be grown. The greatest example of the liberating revelation of democratic capitalism is that today in the West, the average person has a lifestyle that the wealthiest kings in Europe could only dream of a short time ago. The two young activists were convicted of conducting propaganda against the state. They were convicted for handing out leaflets that distort the party and the state's policy in relation to religion and land, and exhibit a twisted viewpoint regarding the Spratly and Paracel Islands in the borderland between Vietnam and China. The conviction of these two young people shows the insecurity of the Vietnamese government, and by acting in this way is akin to dictatorship. Police arrested Phuong Nguyen and took her to the police station without informing her family. Her family were not aware that she was for 8 days, where she was for 8 days, and only became aware of her whereabouts after searching for her and making a public search for her. Her family were eventually told of her detention at another police station after over 1 week of worrying and searching. If these allegations did not take place as stated by her mother, or if they did, this is in contravention of everything human rights and everything that the Australia-Vietnam Human Rights Dialogue stands for. The Australia-Vietnam Human Rights Dialogue is meant to demonstrate the maturity of Australia's relationship with Vietnam.
Order. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are